Greetings and welcome to From the Basement. In this episode, we're going to take a look at getting our exits created so the koalas can be rescued, and also looking at our first hazards. Now, I've done a few minor things off camera. I renamed the original test room into Move Test Room, and then I duplicated that out and cleaned up the insides to create a logic test room for testing game logic such as switches and locks and stuff like that and exits, and also a hazard test room where we can test our hazards. Having test rooms like this is really important to game development because not only does this give you a good way to, work out how things should work without messing up your existing levels, but it also gives you a great way of trying to find bugs. If you realize that, wait a minute, my buzzsaws aren't working right, instead of trying to debug them in a room that has everything else in it, you can put just a koala and just a buzzsaw in this room and see if you can reproduce the bug. And if you can reproduce the bug, then you've greatly narrowed down where the problem could be. If you can't reproduce the bug, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, well, apparently it's an interaction between the saw and something else in that room that's causing things to get messed up. So you can sort of see how this really helps you out. So, pause the video. Take a moment, get these two rooms created, the logic test room and the hazard test room, and then we will continue on from there. All right, so close those out. Now, before I get into creating the exit, I want to get a little bit more of the game framework put in. Right now, we've got our reset on the koala. Problem is, we're not always guaranteed of having a koala around. Now, we need to make sure that our controller is working as well. So, we don't have a controller yet. So, objects, create object. I'm going to call this controller. I'm going to create a new sprite. Now, here's something really kind of neat. I don't have a sprite set up for the controller yet. So, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on New, and it will automatically create a new sprite and link it up for me. So I'm going to call this SPR controller, edit sprite, new, just leave it as a, I guess I should keep it 40 by 40, match the grid. And honestly, I'm just going to take the paint can, grab a nice pink color because it looks horrible and is like really obvious. And use that. And uncheck visible, because obviously I don't want the player to see that ugly thing. Now, what I'm going to do is, first of all, in our koala, remember we have our reset. I'm going to modify. I'm going to take that out of here, so just delete. If I had more logic to it, I would have copied it, but there's no logic there. Key press. Oops, not key release. Key press. Letters. Our main one, restart room, dunk. And for testing purposes, it'll also be very useful to have a next room and a previous room to be able to control how we move through our rooms. So I'm going to add in a key press, letters, in for next, and I will have that to be moved to next room. Oops, didn't mean to click on that check mark. And add event, key press, letters, P, and I will have that be previous. Now I mean to check on the check mark. And I'm going to go through and add this in to all of my objects. Make sure you don't put this on a wall or something, because the default behavior is to usually remove what's underneath. So you've got to be careful of that. Plus, by default, it actually selects things that you put your mouse cursor over. But GameMaker also likes to delete things that are under the mouse, too. So put it in an empty spot. Oops, no, not you, koala. It's very bright, so hard to miss. Let's make sure we got one in every spot. All right. So we're good. Now let's take a look at our exit. Let's create a new object. Now we're not going to follow the order that the book does this in. We're going to create both exits now, as opposed to creating exit 1 now and exit 2 later. Also, as usual, I disagree with how the book has their interactions set up. The exit isn't acting on the koala, at least not from my viewpoint. The koala is running into the exit. The koala is where I should be putting this logic in. So that way I've got one spot to go to in my game to work on those interactions. But we'll keep it the way the book has it. So we will call this exit 1. Now I didn't follow the book's naming convention for my sprites, but I do know that the exit 1 is the red exit. Now, when a koala collides with this, the koala needs to be rescued. So we're going to do an add event collision with a koala. Now, we don't want the rescue to happen instantly. We want this to wait until the koala is fully aligned with this tile. So we'll go to Control. We will check our grid, set it to 40, 40, and Other. Remember, we're in the exit. The exit will always be aligned to the grid. The other, the koala, is what we need to check. And since we are asking, are we on the grid this time, we leave not alone. Drag in our blocks. And we need to destroy the koala. Because now that it's rescued, it doesn't need to be on the game anymore. So we're going to destroy it. Destroy other. Make sure you're destroying other. And for lives, I'll explain this one in just a moment when we go back to look at the controller. But for lives, we need, need to set it to 1. Now, I'm not entirely sure what is with this icon. Now, you've got this crossed out high score is your set lives. How that image translates to set lives, I don't know. Also, and this is also confusing here, to test your lives, you use a square. It's like, I think the only instance in which you use a square action icon for a question. Horribly confusing. And then this is draw, and this is draw with sprites. It's like, I don't know. But this crossed out high score is indeed your set lives. So we're going to set lives to 1 relative. In other words, we're going to add 1 to our lives. That's pretty much it for exit 1, so we'll hit OK. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and do exit 2, so we're going to right-click, duplicate. I'm going to call this exit 2. I'm going to change its sprite. Very important that if two objects have different functionality, that they need to have different visuals. You never want to leave the player guessing as to what something does. That's bad design. Obviously, limited exceptions, puzzles, maybe, things like that, but you got to be careful with that. Generally speaking, two objects do two different things. They should have different sprites, different images, something to indicate to the player something is different. So we've got a blue sprite, and the blue exits are one use. Only one koala can use these. So we'll go to main 1, destroy, drag that into the end of the block there, and we'll apply that one to self. So we have destroy other, set lives to 1, add 1 to our lives, and then destroy self in that order. Okay, so let's test this. This is logic, so open up the logic room. Put in some koalas. Put in 2 exits there. Put in 2 exits there. Hit the play button. In for the next level. And those guys should go on and then disappear. Very good. And then these guys should go on, and both the exit and the koala should disappear. Very good. Now, there's a possibility that you might have seen something a little bit different. You might have seen your koalas disappear underneath the exits. See if I did this the correct order. See if I can force that to appear. Nope. Okay. I need to destroy my koalas and recreate them. That's right. And again, that's a depth issue, just a layering issue. Oops, next. There we go. See how the koala seemed like it walked underneath the exit? That's not what we want to see. And of course, we don't want, while we're designing our levels, to have to remember, oh, I always have to add my koalas first. Simple fix, we need to go into exit 1 and exit 2 and change our depth to, the book uses 10. And again, that's why we set the depth to 10 on these. We always want the koalas to be on top of these guys. In more complicated games, it can actually be a really good idea to have like a spreadsheet that tracks the depth of all of your objects. So that way you know what layer which object is on. Now if I test this, they should go on top regardless. And there we go. Okay, so let's add a little bit more of our game framework in. And you'd think I would learn by now. Every time I go through and do this example, I always mess up on my rooms. I always forget that I can't actually put the border up here. So take a moment to move things around here because I have to. Guess I could have just moved the objects too, but And the reason for this will become apparent in a moment. And then I can also, no, I'm still in tile mode. Respect to objects, move my controller up into that corner, and re-put back down my wall here. And I need to do that with every room. I'll fix them as we go along here. So why we had to do that is because of how we're going to show things. So let's get our controller back up. Now the controller needs to do a couple of different things here. Our controller is going to be responsible both for monitoring our game state, checking to see when we need to move to the next level, also for displaying our rescued koalas. So I'm going to add, let's do the rescue part first. So we're going to add a draw event, and we're going to go ahead and do a draw GUI because this is GUI commands. We always want this on top. In this particular case, honestly, it wouldn't really matter much if we did draw or draw GUI since the controller by itself doesn't have a sprite that we need to worry about overwriting. Still, matter of principle, GUI stuff, I'm going to use draw GUI. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a sprite. So I'm going to come down here to my draw commands. And one of those options is a draw sprite. This little green Pac-Man. So I'll drag him over. And the sprite I want to draw is under GUI. And I'm going to draw rescued. My X will be 10, 0, and sub-image of 0. Make sure you change that sub-image. So it's draw, rescued, 10, 0, 0. This is an absolute coordinate. I don't want this one to be relative. That's where I want to draw this. Next thing I want to do is draw my lives. So I'm going to go into score, and I want to draw my lives with sprites. So I'm going to use this version of the heart here, draw life images. And this value is going to be 150, 0, and I will draw a koala stand. Again, not relative. This is an absolute coordinate. That is where I want to draw it. And so this is why we increased our lives. Lives is just a variable. Just because it's called lives doesn't mean that you have to use it in the traditional sense. It's just a variable, just a container for information. We can use it however we want. So in this case, we're just simply using it to keep track of how many koalas did we rescue. So hit the play button. Move test room is going to look a little bit weird because we're going to have the UI drawn on top, which that's odd. Where'd it go? Okay. It appears that we have a slight bug. Interesting. What are you doing, game? Alright, I'm going to change this event to a standard draw event. It could be that draw GUI is doing something odd in this case. And it is still not working. Okay, debug time, because that should work. Obviously my controller is there because I'm moving from room to room. Oh, right. There. Visible. Always go back through and check your standard information. So yeah, since I turned visible off, it's not going to be drawn. And because I want to get rid of this really nasty default sprite, I do have to use draw. If I didn't use draw, I would still see that. So now it should work. There we go. That's what I was talking about. This is why we had to move the wall down. That looks really weird. Hit the N key. Now we can see, okay, this works pretty good, having it like this. And when I get a koala through an exit, now, we had a slight bug there. I should have 4 koalas. What happened? The most likely answer is that lives is initialized to -1 by GameMaker. It's always a good idea when you're using variables to make sure you initialize them properly. As we can just see, as we saw there, by not initializing lives, ensuring that lives are set to 0, we can have odd things happen. We're going to go back into the controller, add a create event, and in here, we're going to set our lives to 0 absolute. So set 0 not relative, and OK. Now, when we hit the play button, next room, rescued koala, rescued koala, rescued koala, and rescued koala. Now the final thing on this that we need to do is get it moving on to the next room, which is also a reason why I have my hazard room last, so that way clearing the logic test room will move me into the hazard room, is that on our controller here, we need a step event. And just a regular old step event will work just fine. So we'll add event step. And what we'll do is we'll count the number of koalas in the room. So we will test instance count. And we will test to see how many koalas we have. And if the number of koalas we have is equal to 0, then we need to transition to the next room. Now, we've got to do a little bit of alteration to this because in the book, they've got a block here, but then they use the sleep command, which has always been a horrible command, and then they move to the next room. Now, you definitely want to pause to give the player a chance to recognize that, oh, hey, I cleared the level, but we don't have the sleep command anymore, which is a good thing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take out my blocks because I don't really need them. I'm going to set a timer, and I'm going to set a timer for 30 steps. And actually, you know what? Let's not use timers. Let's just use a message that sort of works good enough. So I'm going to display message, say level cleared. And now I do need my control blocks back in here. So we'll say level cleared, and then move on to the next room. So let's test that. And rescue, 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 rescue. Level cleared. Ah, I understand where my error is there. Abort. There be no koalas in the hazard test room. I'm going to go ahead and fix this room up since I am in here. Clear that out. Move my wall up there. Or my controller, I should say. Put my wall back in. Go to my tiles. So I think this is just faster this way. And I'm not going to fix the corner. It's a test room. And importantly, drop a koala in here so I don't automatically get kicked off of it. Test it again. Clear, 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 clear. Next room. Yay. And life is good. All right. Well, I know I said we would get our first hazard in this video. I apparently lied because we're already past the 20-minute mark. That's kind of where I like to maximum keep the video length to. So we'll go ahead and cut it off here. And on the next video, we will take a look at getting our hazards implemented. And so, until then.